What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Ups and Downs using the finger of power, a totally unique idea that we just came up roughly last week. Regardless, guys, this episode is all about a suggestion by one of you guys in the comments down below. Episode 1 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 1 featuring Jaden Yugi. We haven't seen any of this, so this is all be brand new. More for like I guess a reaction type review of this episode. Joining me this episode is our good friend and fabulous flamboyant, is that a word? Welcome to the stream.
Hey, we'll add it to the dictionary and we'll get it approved by next month. How you doing, guys? Glad to be here.
Exactly. So we, of course, our good friend Liam is in the episode right now. So like I mentioned before, we have no history with Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
Really appreciate the suggestion for everyone else to come and look back at what some of the things we may have missed.
And of course, we're throwing it right back to you guys. If there's any suggestions for what we should watch next, let us know. It doesn't have to be Yu-Gi-Oh! It could be Pokemon as well. Guys, leave your suggestions down below what we should watch next. So now, let's go start using the finger power of all the good bits. We'll give it an up, and the bad bits, we'll give it a down. Now, let us roll into the first episode. Alright, so we basically start out this episode with Jaden running to some location. Basically, I guess there's some kind of evaluation happening to this academy. I don't even know when this academy first started or whatnot, but I guess it's a pretty big deal in this universe. He basically runs into our good buddy, Yugi, from the very first, I guess, generation. Now, this is all we see of Yugi, but of course, with this iconic scene, we're definitely going to give this good bit, an up.
We definitely did appreciate the way that the way they introduced him in a non-pushing in your face way. It was quick.
Agreed. And another reason why we're giving this an up too, because like it wasn't, even though they showed Yami Yugi, it wasn't to the point where this is the main character. In a way, it actually kind of helped Jaden here, because he kind of like passed a card, almost passing a torch with this card, this Winged Karibo, to Jaden Yuki. And it basically says to like anonymously, this is your card, this belongs to you. I feel it that this card belongs to you. He just accepts it, and but I think Jaden recognized him, but he didn't say his name or anything like that, but he did recognize it for some reason. So that in a way that was kind of weird.
I guess it's hard to recognize without that little Bow Wow gold chain around his neck. You know what I mean? That's kind of a iconic.
But his hair, though, how do you not recognize his hair?
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
You may not have the Vellian puzzle, but like with his hair. But regardless, I mean, that was more of a nitpick than anything.
Keeps the iconic clothing, but at the same time, doesn't give everyone a full panorama view of him like they did for Kaiba in the first episode. Kind of get the protagonist feel to it.
This is kind of a cool little introduction with Jaden kind of like passing the torch from Yami Yugi as the next, I guess, possible King of Games. As the title suggests, the next King of Games.
With this intro, which is because of the new generation, it's different. And in my thoughts, I think it's a bit of a down because the year of the music that it kind of gives off.
When you compare the opening song that was presented back in like the original compared to this song, this felt outdated to me. I don't know, like it felt way too poppy. This series, I guess, premiered around 2005. Now keep that in mind. But for some reason, the music, especially the opening cinematic music, like it felt corny to me. It felt way too like early 90s, mid 90s. That's the reason why we're giving it down. It's not my favorite. Some people might like it, and I'm sorry if you do. But for us, we don't like it.
It's a hard pass.
It's a hard pass. Now going with the music though, like apart from the opening music, we did like the other ones. It felt, to me, it's more like a nostalgic, almost like Sonic the Hedgehog animate. If you guys ever watch that, to me, I kind of like the way, especially the very first song that played with Jaden kind of running. It also reminded me of like Sonic the Hedgehog music, like gotta go fast type music, and I actually enjoyed that for the most part. And after the opening cinematic theme song here, the music wasn't that bad. Like I enjoyed those. I kind of wish they kind of used more of that in their opening theme song than what we've heard. In a way, it kind of contradicts it, but we're gonna have to give that other music, at least the other composition of the music, an up.
Within the time frame of bumping into Yugi and finally getting over into the academy, there's still duels going on. The 3D animation technology is still well in use in a big way, as they have multiple testing areas so that they can have multiple students tested at the same time.
They kind of didn't really explain like the origin of the academy. They just kind of assume that people knew about the academy and like people want to be in part of the academy. For the most part, this is the scene where pretty much Jaden is like running to make sure he doesn't get late. And he almost was late actually. And we're introduced to this other character right here. A him, a her, we don't know. They joked about it like 3 or 4 times, but we could talk about that more later. You can tell this character is a villain automatically. And is also one of the only characters in the entire, I guess, episode here that's not really attractive. But this is the only character that's like blatantly grotesque.
Kind of fell on deaf ears, you know.
We got introduced to this other character, kind of like almost like a beginner type character, so similar to like Taya or a Tristan type character that's like more of like still learning the basics, and he barely made it through the competition, or at least the testing round here. The
passive one of the group.
Some of the characters that were introduced, these kind of feel like upperclassmen. I believe it's Alexis and Zane. Zane looks like he kind of reminds me, has that same kind of personality that Seto Kaiba has, and Alexis kind of feels like a My Valentine character, but not, I guess, not as pushy as her. Like upperclassmen, like they're not amateurs in terms of like they're not like freshmen in this academy. We don't know that for sure, but that's the vibe I was getting throughout the entire episode. And they're basically watching these other classmates to see if who else is going to be added into the academy.
As our hero is rushing towards the big building on his way up into the academy, he has to try and bargain his way quickly.
And honestly, like I love the positive personality this character has. Like I feel like nothing can make him like mad or upset. And for that, I'm gonna give that an up. At the same time, we can talk about that later, but it's also kind of a negative as well. But we'll get into that as we later in the episode. But right now, I'm loving his personality. Like he kind of reminds me of like almost like a Joy Wheeler type personality. Very, very positive, very determined, very charismatic. We'll see how that goes later in the episode.
As we pan in towards the testing center for the academy, we see Bastian starting off in his duel at the testing teachers, and personally, procedures are used. I think they're really useful and a decent way to go about sorting through the people, keeping the test conditions to a high standard, but at the same time everyone gets to view down and get to see exactly what combinations they're playing. Nonetheless, it's a very, very triumphant fight, and during this intense exchange with the tutor, smart guy decides he's going to pull out the trap card, and when he pulls out the Ring of Destruction, kind of turning the whole tide of the battle upside its head. It
was kind of funny too, like what the I guess the instructor or teacher here was like, I'll give you 3 options, and it was like one is like cry to your mommy, B is forfeit, C is like whatever, and it was like no, D, none of the above, and he pulls out this card. So I thought that was a pretty funny jab at the teacher.
It tells a lot of the level of humor that we can expect through these series, I think.
And that, I guess we give that one a good up. Now, another character is introduced, Chaz. Now, Chaz is like, you can definitely tell he's going to be one of the antagonists in this series. It was kind of fun. I'm not sure if it's going to be an up or a down, but his 2 lackeys here have the most terrible voice acting. Like to a point where even I can probably read a voice acting if I want to emulate something. Like I don't even know, like the guy with the glasses, for example, it sounds like he's trying to be like almost like a southern accent, but it comes out way too humorous to even be noticeable. And of course, the guy with the almost Brock-like hair, he's like, it kind of sounds like the typical like dumb drone voice. If you can kind of imagine that. We have to wait and see if those voices are gonna annoy us later on. But right now, it's kind of humorous. But at the same time, like we just have to point that out. The voice acting for those 2 lackeys, not the greatest. So Jaden finally makes it into the facility. He talks to Cyrus here. They're finally formally introduced, and apparently they're like best friends right off the bat. But we'll find out more about that later. Because he's late, the last matches are like already said and done, and that kind of gets to a point where like does he even get a chance to qualify. But as we roll in, we'll find exactly how he's able to still make the qualifiers.
They kind of drive in a joke that kind of lands on deaf ears. They kind of play on the he/she because of
The way he's dressed,
misidentifying.
the way this character is dressed, and the way the character looks.
There comes a point where further in from this conversation of that mentioning of the mistake of him/her. Shortly after that, they get a call from their boss where they proceed to run the him/her joke in a little bit too heavily.
And I feel like they really tried to make this like a joke. But then again, like at 2005, this could be conceived as funny, I guess. The entire episode was like maybe 22 minutes, but then this entire joke like lasted maybe 4 of those minutes, maybe. I don't know, 3 minutes maybe. The joke actually didn't age well, I think. It's a little bit of a nitpick, but it's gonna be a down for us.
He proceeds to tell that basically do not do anything eccentric such as what they did last year. And the example was, and they did cut 1/3 of the applicants. They never really explained the depth as to why.
I guess it's just because Crowley didn't believe in the students, whatever. But regardless, moving on to the next scenes. Obviously, he's not happy about it, and of course, there's still one more person that still needs to apply, and of course, that is going to be Jaden. So instead of using the test decks, Professor Crowler here decided to use a personal deck that he made himself.
Or herself.
Or herself. All right, and then we get a little exchange here before Jaden goes into the arena, basically saying that I'm glad that you're number 2, and of course, who's the number 1? It's me. So again, with the confidence that Jaden has. But of course, now he goes into the competition against Professor Crowley. Now during this entire exchange, it's back and forth, kind of like throwing the jokes back at Professor Crowley. And the one thing I want to point out with Professor Crowley, kind of reminds me of like almost like a Jesse James feel, like for Pokemon, like Team Rocket kind of vibe to it. Whereas like it kind of feels like this is gonna be like a reoccurring battle between Jaden throughout the academy that he enters. And but this is one of their first matches. We'll see exactly what cards they both have in this duel. So let's get on with the match itself.
With this generation, our main character here has a elemental hero themed deck. He's coming in to be tested by a build of a deck that the teacher chose to take out personally. He went in ahead and summoned the elemental hero monster, proceeded to stick it in defense mode, I believe.
Yeah, and it's a pretty weak monster, but I guess he was just kind of testing the field.
Was shortly after that when he ended his turn. He proceeds to put a card down in the trap and spell area. He proceeds to pull out and use Confiscate, and as such pays the life points to activate its effect.
Yeah, so like basically about 1,000 life points, but it allows him, Professor Crowley, to use and to basically see what cards he has and select one of his cards to place it in the graveyard, and he choose Monster Reborn, which is actually a pretty smart move. So with this smart move, we'll give that a solid up. So the next move he does, which was kind of interesting. First, he lays down 2 cards face down. He proceeds to use a card known as Heavy Storm. I was originally going to give this a down, but it actually turned out pretty smart later on because he basically used the Heavy Storm to destroy the spell or trap card within Jaden's side of the field. That was smart. He mentioned in his turn that it only destroys his side, and then once it goes back to Jaden, it says, oh, you forgot that it also destroys yours as well. So it kind of corrected itself in a way, but it was actually smart too because Professor Crowley knew that, and those 2 cards that were destroyed were 2 trap cards, and when destroyed and put in the graveyard can actually be summoned as a monster, which he then tribute summon for his ultimate rare card, which a lot of the students mentioned prior to its summon. So during the scene, Zane mentioned that there's like a special rare card that Professor Crowley has that I guess hasn't been seen yet by any students. And of course right now we get to see exactly what that monster is.
As the ancient gear golem is put into the field, all the students are seeing for the first time, takes to the battlefield and in the first turn goes to attack the defense monster. And
destroys
unfortunately, with that card, destroying a defense monster also inflicts piercing damage as well.
Yes, good point. Yeah.
With this golem, with 3,000 attack power, as you can tell, it's a powerhouse.
Oh yes.
It goes to show you that in this generation, it's no longer the Blue Eyes White Dragon out there that's the distinctive characters. The meat shielding of his one character at the time, and it puts him in a bit of a tight situation.
And this whole exchange obviously was pretty cool for the most part, so we're going to give this one a solid up as well. So that brings his life points down to 2,000, and Professor Crowler still has 3,000 left because obviously 1,000 was used for that magic card. Now this is the part that more like a nitpick than anything, but we talked about it before. I love his confidence, but at the same time it also shows a little bit too much confidence, and to me that's kind of like a nitpick because you kind of want to see like a little bit of a character development. I kind of wish Jaden here showed a little bit of self-doubt. When you compare it to the very first episode, Generation 1 Yu-Gi-Oh! Even then, there was a bit of a self-doubt with Yugi pulling in hopes for the next card, the cards pull to, I guess, defeat Kaiba. If I want to like kind of invest in a character, I want to see both sides, both the good and the bad. And right now, there's not much of a character development right now with Jade. At the same time, yes, it is still the first episode. We could see that eventually his spirit falling later on. But right now, there's a little bit too much confidence. So it's kind of both a good and a bad. But with that nitpick, unfortunately, we have to give that one a slight down, unfortunately.
There just comes a point where there's just too much of one thing and not a shared space of everything.
And like I said, we may see it later on, but you know, obviously, guys, let us know in the comments down below what episode you guys want us to watch next from the GX generation, I guess.
Once the piercing damage has been done and he's got nothing left on the field, thankfully, he has a bit of a sensory moment and he pulls one of the old faithful Wing Karibo.
What's interesting about the Wing Karibo is that for some reason it winks at him. I don't know what that's about, but apparently this Karibo has his own life force somehow that like Yami Yugi invested or put into this card for Jaden. So I guess we'll see what that means later on.
Certainly a nice addition, especially for something that's not overly attack heavy, as with a lot of cards as they've gone over the generation.
So yeah, obviously he remembers that was the card. Give it to him, so he's gonna use it right now in face up, I guess. Face up defense. I don't know what it is with like Yugi, but I thought it was you can only place cards face down defense, but apparently here you can put them in face up defense, but that's neither here nor there. At this point right now, Professor Crowler is like, oh, I'm definitely going to destroy you right now, especially with the piercing damage that potentially could happen. But for some reason, as high-end a Professor, I guess he didn't know the effect of the Winged Karibo. The Winged Karibo obviously receives 0 damage regardless. It ends the turn right then and there. It is destroyed and put into graveyard. It kind of saves Jaden here for one more turn. So
during the midst of this battle, you have Alexa and Zane watching over and giving their own thought. One thinking that you can't know all of the combinations out there that can be played. Why the surprising moment of the Karibo stumping a lot of the people in the crowd watching.
So after Winged Karibo was destroyed, that of course activated his trap card known as the Hero's Symbol, and that allows him to summon another hero card from his deck. Potentially another waifu card, but like this card, not so strong in the attack department, but another hero nonetheless. He goes ahead and summons another card, and this magic card allows him to bring back a card from the graveyard. So now he has 2 hero cards in his field for play. And right now, Professor Crowler thinks that he hasn't won because there's no way those 2 cards can attack his Ancient Gear Golem with 3,000 attack. But he went ahead and did another move known as Polymerization to combine those 2 heroes to an even stronger hero card. So with that Polymerization, those 2 cards turned into the Elemental Hero, Flame Wingman. Very generic name nonetheless, but it still is not strong enough, only at 2100, so he activates 1 more card. But before we get there, we have this weird, kind of awkward scene with these 2 characters.
Close to the end of the episode conversation, we got Bastion next to Cyrus, and it kind of gives me a bit of a cringe scenario where, you know, you can tell this little guy is going to attach himself to someone real quick,
like real hard, like yeah,
like almost to the point where you know, almost like attached to your leg. Kind of is a bit too forward considering that they've only ever just met.
Yeah, and with that, we're gonna have to give that one a down, only because it kind of feels like they're pushing this friendship a little bit too strong with this character. And like Liam was saying, they just met, so there's no way that I guess they'd be friends. But still, like, I just felt like they kind of made that a little bit too strong, and of course very cringy as well.
After the cringeful conversation, we kind of pan back in as our guy's building up the combinations of putting his cards together and equipping them. The teacher, Professor Crowler, with the big, confident, bougie attitude, calling out that he's using amateur moves, making mistakes, feeling like that there's nothing that he can bring to the table. He activates the field spell card, Skyscraper. He proceeds to go for the attack, and with that card of the Skyscraper, an additional damage phase bonuses are triggered from it, which is an additional 1,000 damage.
Oh yes.
Just enough to take out the 3,000 damage Ancient Gear Golem. And additionally, through the awesomeness of this card, the damage of the actual card he takes out is dealt directly to the opponent's life point.
And of course, Crowley takes the L in this episode. In disbelief that an amateur-like student like him can best a card like the Ancient Gear Golem. Overall, the match itself gets an up, but a kind of a weak up. But at the same time, it is the first match, and we'll definitely see more of like Jaden's abilities and skills. Because apparently with his academy as 4, I guess is for aspiring duelists that want to be better or somewhat. I still don't know the whole concept of this academy. Like, what's the purpose of it? But regardless, well, I guess we'll find out more in the later episodes. And of course, going back to what we said, the confidence level of Jaden is both good and bad. Kind of like what we were talking about before when we were watching this episode. Like, I felt like there was nothing that was thrown at Jaden to like hinder any of that confidence level that he had. Like, if you ever watched the original match with Seto Kaiba and Yugi Moto, there was always that battle back and forth. Like, sometimes he's winning, sometimes Yugi's winning, sometimes Kaiba's winning, sometimes Yugi's winning. So it was more like back and forth. Where this match, apart from that one little misstep, I guess, with him summoning the monster and destroying his face down defense, for the most part, he was pretty much an up and up. Like he knew exactly what he was doing from the get-go, and there was nothing like diverting him from his confidence. Or even introducing some kind of self-doubt in Jaden. So I'm hoping to see some kind of character development with Jaden, like to see some kind of like progression in character, like when he does actually lose a match or gets close to losing a match. And right now, yes, it is the first match, but I kind of wish there was a bit more struggle to get him to that end and that eventual W.
As mentioned earlier, the teacher decided to take this one more personally than allowing any other one to have a go, because again, our guy was a little bit late, so they decided to make the example, which backfired in the end. We're thankful.
Now, what's kind of interesting about this too, because it showed Jaden performing at such a high level and defeating a professor's own deck, it kind of shows a little bit more of attention to all the other students, to include the seniors in this academy, that he's actually a pretty good duelist. So we'll definitely keep an eye on this character, Jaden, in future matches and future duels. And of course, a big nod back to Winnie Karibo for his assists in a match, because if it wasn't for him absorbing that damage, he probably would have lost then and there. And that's pretty much how the episode concluded here. There is no like teaser that the episode 1 of the original Yugi season 1 showed. It's still a little intriguing of what could possibly happen, but at the same time, there is no like hook to make me want to watch the next one compared to the previous episode we did. Obviously, if you guys haven't seen that, definitely check it out. We have a link somewhere at the top of our very first episode of Ups and Downs. But it doesn't mean that episode was terrible for the most part. You could have hooked the audience a little bit more at the end. But overall, I guess, what do you think about this episode, Liam?
I think as a fast way to introduce the people, it was decent, but they didn't exactly introduce many of the characters. I mean, there was a lot of characters.
I would think the opposite. I think they introduced too many characters.
Really? I mean, yeah, there were a lot in the intro.
Yeah, because if you think about like the other episode, they introduced like Taya, Tristan, Joey, Kaiba, and of course the grandfather, but he was more of a side character, so he doesn't really count. But in terms of the main character roster, whereas this one, we had Chaz, we had Jaden, we had Alexis, we have Zane, we have Cyrus, we have Bastion. Like, there's a lot of main characters that were introduced in the very first episode. So to me, I felt like they were choosing way too many characters in the beginning, and they probably could introduce them more so later, I think.
I mean, I like the episode. It's nice to see the other generations, how they kind of interact with each other in the school setting, like the original days. You know, there was no big dueling school.
Keep in mind, Kaiba just invented that when we watched it. So this was, I don't know how many generations it is after the ending of the Yugi Muto's saga, getting a much more, I guess, involvement in these dueling arenas.
I give this one a down, to be honest. It had some classic moments, but some of the things that fell on deaf ears were too counterintuitive to kind of offset the balance of the amount of positive things that were trying to be portrayed.
I think for me, it's going to be an overall up, but a very weak overall up. The kind of same cons that Liam was saying. Some of the depth of the characters I felt like was pretty weak for the most part. Yes, you could always do that later on in episodes. I guess the main protagonist, Professor Crowler, felt like more like a comedy duel than an actual, like, kind of be taken a little more seriously. That could be both good and bad. It kind of depends on your perspective. But for us, I think it's kind of like a more of a down. If we were introduced to this, which we are introduced for the very first time, I feel like this won't instill us to watch more of it just for the main villain itself.
With this combination of pantomime level character that the professor kind of gives off, ostentatious kind of personality.
Very expressive, right? Very expressive.
Yeah, you'd expect to see them on a Broadway stage.
I mean, yeah, he definitely gives off that vibe for sure. But we'll definitely have to see where this goes. But like I mentioned before, it kind of feels like more like a Jesse James Team Rocket vibe. Obviously, guys, it doesn't mean that episode was bad. It just means that because we don't have like a nostalgic feel to this, we're kind of like basing this episode more as a critic versus anything. It's still a good episode for the most part. It still intrigues us, and to see where this goes, obviously we have to wait and see. Obviously, this is the second generation of Yu-Gi-Oh that we're not really familiar with. Obviously, we're down to watch some more episodes. Leave your comments down below of what we should watch next, whether it be from the same generation or something else. Obviously, there's multiple generations out there to include, obviously, GX, 5D, Zendel, I guess, and Arch V. So, obviously, let us know. Comments down below. And real quick, before we conclude, she's definitely in love with Jaden. I'm calling it right now, guys. I'm calling it right now. Even though we haven't watched any of the episodes for GX, she's definitely falling for this youngling, this undergraduate. I don't know. Maybe I'm just throwing it out there, but that's just my opinion. Regardless, alright, guys, that pretty much concludes it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys did enjoy this, definitely give us a like down below, and of course, subscribe for more future ups and downs where we use our finger power for all the good bits and all the bad bits. If you haven't already done so, definitely check out our collective domain store, link down below. Obviously, we have plenty of cards up for grabs and for sale. If you guys checked out our Instagram, link down below, we have this bad boy available for sale. Check out our Instagram. We have all the cards listed for sale as of right now. And that's pretty much all I got, guys. We'll definitely see you in the next one. This is Talos and Liam signing out.
Peace.